oppressors were celebrated, there were those who would not accept this. So to them, they would live free or die hard.
Germany, 1933. Hitler gains control of the German government and quickly works to turn Germany into a fully oiled war machine. One of his first moves was to create a mandatory pre-military program for the German youth, disguised as a harmless, fun, outdoor adventure, the Hitler Youth. Those who disliked the Hitler Youth had two ways of avoiding it: finding a darn good excuse, or literally going into hiding when the Hitler Youth was in session. Most boys enjoyed or lived with the Hitler Youth, but as is the case with anything mandatory, it soon became unpopular. Two different groups started to escape these drills.
One of these groups was the Edelweiss Pirates. They disliked the Hitler Youth and formed their own legal versions of the outdoor experiences that the Hitler Youth claimed. It started as a mostly harmless camping, hiking, and the like, but then the government cracked down and declared the Edelweiss Pirates outlaws. Tension escalated between the pirates and the Hitler Youth, and fights were common. Some groups took it to the next level, though. The Cologne Edelweiss Pirates were a good example. Several of them learned that the Allies were planning to bomb Cologne, and they sabotaged anti-aircraft guns and killed the leader of the Cologne Gestapo. However, the Nazi justice was swift and harsh. Days later, 16 Edelweiss pirates were rounded up and hung, and countless more were sent to concentration camps or executed in private.
The second group, created to escape the Hitler Youth, was the Swing Kids. The Hitler Youth separated boys and girls, and even classes were sometimes separated. The Swing Kids got together to date, dance, and listen to jazz music, which was frowned upon by the Nazis. Heinrich Himmler, second in command, ordered the Gestapo to round them up, saying that they wore their hair long and said "Swing Hail" instead of "Hail Hitler." Like the Edelweiss Pirates, several were sent to concentration camps.
There were some groups that resisted for purely political reasons. One of these was the Hellmuth-Hubener group. Hellmuth-Hubener was a boy brought up in a Mormon community by his grandparents. He had a strong sense of justice, as well as a wild side. One day, his brother, a Nazi soldier in France, brought home an AM radio along with a pair of headphones. He started listening to a British news station, BBC, which had been banned by the Nazis. He soon found out that the Nazi reports didn't add up with the BBC ones. A week later, he and two friends, Rudy Wob and Karl-Heinz Schneid, were avid listeners, and soon began to distribute pamphlets written by Helmut. He was caught, however, while trying to have these pamphlets translated into French. The French resistance, or the FFI, held that you couldn't withstand Nazi torture for more than one day, but Helmut withstood them for 2. Even then, he bore the whole brunt of the bullying, and even though the Nazis could not believe that these teenagers had created a resistance movement by themselves, they still sentenced Helmut to death and both of his friends to lengthy concentration camp terms.
The last group, the White Rose, was the best known and made the biggest impact on the people of Germany. While they were children, Hans and Sophie Scholl's parents disliked Hitler and shared their opinions with their children. At first, the children rejected this idea, but once they entered the University of Munich, it became painfully clear that their father was speaking the truth of Hitler. After the death of an archbishop, they, along with Christoph Probst and a psychology teacher named Kurt Huber, who ironically became a philosophy teacher, began to create and distribute a total of 6 different informative pamphlets. The city of Munich was all at once exposed to the truth, and while they pretended to cheer for the Nazis, many of them secretly hated Hitler. As Hans put it, "We will not be silent. We are your bad conscience. White Rose will not leave you in peace." But on the day the 6th pamphlet was spread, it all came to an end. The White Rose had made about 1,000 pamphlets and had stuffed them in a suitcase. They threw them over the balcony of the University of Munich and ran, only to realize that they had 200 left. They quickly ran back and threw the last 200 over, but at that moment the bell rang and in walked the janitor. who was a member of the Nazi Party. He chased and caught Sophie and called the Gestapo, who later rounded up the rest of the members. Nazi justice was swift and harsh.
Hans Fritz Scholl, Munich, born in Ingersheim, September 22nd, 1918. Sophia Magdalena Scholl, Munich, born at Forstenberg, May 9th, 1921. And Christoph Hermann Probst of Alderans by Innsbruck, born at Murnau, November 6, 1919.
Now in investigative custody regarding treasonous assistance to the enemy, preparing to commit high treason, and weakening of the nation's armed security, the People's Court. On this account, they are to be punished by death.
Their honor and rights as citizens are forfeited for all time.
Alexander Schmorl, Kurt Huber, and Wilhelm Graf, in the time of war, have fabricated leaflets calling for sabotage of the war effort and for the overthrowing of the National Socialist way of the German people. The propagated defeatist ideas have mostly and vulgarly defamed Führer or Hitler, thereby giving aid to the enemy of the Reich and weakening the armed security of the nation. On this account, they are to be punished by death.
Their honor and rights as citizens are forfeited for all time. Eugene Grimminger gave money to a person guilty of high treason in aid of the enemy. To be sure, he was not aware that by doing so, he was aiding the enemy of the Reich. However, he was aware that this person might use the money for the purpose of robbing our people of their National Socialist way of life. Because he gave support to high treason, he was sentenced to jail for a 10-year term, together with loss of honorable estate.
Heinrich Bollinger and Helmut Bauer had knowledge of a treasonable conspiracy, but failed to report it. In addition, the two listened to foreign radio newscasts dealing with the war and with events inside Germany. For this reason, they are sentenced to a jail term of 7 years and loss of citizens' honor.
Hans Herzl and Franz Müller, both immature boys misled by enemies of the state, gave support to the spread of treasonous propaganda against National Socialism. For this action, they are sentenced to 5 years imprisonment.
Heinrich Guder had knowledge of propagandistic intentions of this sort, but failed to report them. For this, he is sentenced to 18 months imprisonment.
Gisela Schurtling, Katharina Skudikoff, and Trant Lafrenz committed the same crimes. As girls, they are sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment.
Suzanne Herzl assisted in the distribution of treasonous leaflets. To be sure, she was not aware of the treasonous nature, but she was guilty in that her inexcusable credulousness and good faith she did not seek certainty concerning the matter. She is sentenced to 6 months imprisonment.
Falk Harnack likewise failed to report his knowledge of treasonous activity, but such unique and special circumstances surrounded his case that we find ourselves unable to punish his deed of omission. He is accordingly set free.
Each tale ends the same: death, imprisonment, and defeat. But defeat is not, in the slightest of the word, that best describes their effort. No, they won a major battle against Hitler. They became role models for other resistance groups: the Chinese Revolt and the Russian Students' Revolt. They fought Hitler with words and actions, and ultimately hastened the defeat of the Nazis.